Hello and welcome to The Current Thing with me, Nick Dixon. Well, that's what it's called for now anyway. We're deciding on a new title, but it's our topical show where it's me and, backed by popular request, Mr. Paul Cox. And by the way, you can get the full episodes of these on nickdixon.net. So go there now, nickdixon.net. You get full podcasts with people like Carl Benjamin, Nima Parvini, Lord Frost, Ben Habib, whoever you like, and of course, Paul. And Paul, you're back. How are you doing?
I'm okay, mate. I'm okay. Thanks for inviting me back again. This is becoming a regular thing now. Lots of fun.
Yeah, and it's we got such great feedback from the last one that I've decided to bring you back. I mean, it sounds like I've decided, but if the feedback changes, Paul, I didn't like the way that sounded. But
You're only as good as your last show.
yeah, can you do it in a tough Tuesday night in Stoke, etc. But we got such good feedback. We brought you back. It was overwhelming feedback for the Cox. I mean, it's been incredible. But there's just
There you
one
go. There's your
guy.
title.
Oh, yeah, well, the title. Yeah, the title. By the way, that's another thing. Where let us know if we should rename it because I've got the current thing, but then it's like, is this one with Paul a separate one? I mean, as Paul has said to me, I've already done all the hard yards setting up
Yeah,
my
yeah.
channel, so it's kind of on my channel for now. Don't worry, we won't be exploiting Paul, but we're just working out how to do it. But it'll never be like certain exploitative relationships that we won't go into. But it will be totally fair. But we're just deciding how to do it and what to call it. I thought Dixon Cox, right? Which
Which I
made me laugh
love.
at home on my own, but then I suddenly thought it's going to get categorized in the gay section, and then I thought maybe the Weekly Gammon, so it's a mixture of my old podcast, The Weekly Skeptic, and your The People's Gammon. That's all I got. So then I gave up, and those are my title ideas. But have you got any ideas, Paul?
No better than that. Anyway, I always
Yeah,
think. I always think these things you overthink. You can overthink. I had a podcast. It wasn't a podcast. So I used to do a.
failed at the first hurdle there.
It wasn't. I'll tell you what it was. Is that a satirical column for something called the Portsmouth Evening News, and I got fired from that, which is why I joined GB News more regularly. But I called the column "Paul the Other One," and then what I would do once a week for people on YouTube is because they don't all access the Portsmouth Evening News. I would just create what essentially was a 6-minute video every week for it. So that was Paul the Other One. But I gave that about a second's thought and I thought, well, that works. Because I think at the end of the day, you're trying to second guess what other people think and want. And other people, they ain't got a clue, have they?
Oh no, you can't trust other people. So we'll come up with something. We'll let you know. It's slightly cut out there for a sec, so I didn't even find out what the name of your column was. But I
Oh,
was
no one
just
would know. No one would know. It was just what happened was I had to. I wrote a column the week of the coronation, the last one I wrote, and I wrote the column in 3 sections. One of the sections was about the actress who said that the royal family balcony was awfully white, and
oh yeah.
very light-hearted satirical column saying if that was the other way around, that would be considered racist, and then wrote a little bit further to say that we're on a race to the bottom when it comes to racism. When we see everything through the prism of skin color, you can find racism anywhere. But it's funny how it's only one color of skin that can be the protagonist, can be the racist person. And anyway, the editor wrote to me and said, as a white man, we don't think you should be writing stuff like this. So we want another column the day before. So I wrote another column about how he told me that I couldn't write about it because I was a white man. And he said he wouldn't publish it. So I got Constantine Kissin to publish it on his Substack, which has a lot more readers than the Portsmouth Evening News, and he never paid me any. He never. So I wrote that satirical column every week for about 8 months for free anyway. So I wasn't paid. So it wasn't like I lost something. But what I did do is I maintained my principle with this big old debate, quite heated debate about. He was a man of a similar age to me, and he just said racism is far worse in this country than it's ever been. And I took him to task on that, asking him to prove it, and he couldn't, to the point that in the end he just fired me.
Well, if we're about anything on this podcast, it's standing up for principles and getting fired. This is the kind of thing I'm always in trouble for. Anyway, it's too much to go into, but I'm always in trouble for standing up for things. And then you get people on the internet saying you're a puppet and a shill of the company you work for, and it's incredibly frustrating. But we can.
Yeah, I'm no hero because I stood up for
You are,
myself.
Paul.
That was like a couple of hours of work a week I did for free. So if that was paying my mortgage, might have been more of a hero. But I was already doing a few headliners, maybe one a month at that point. But then Mark Dolan interviewed me about the story, and it just led to more. And then we are where we are. I'm on headlines regularly now, and And equally as important to that, I'm on the Dixon podcast.
Dixon Cox. It's the one thing I want to say is the commentary was so positive. It set one negative comment about swearing. It said, "Oh, I turned off after the first few minutes because of all the swearing." This is the great thing about American podcasts: you don't get the swearing. And obviously, I wanted to reply to that and just say "fuck off," right? Because that would have been a great reply. But the Podbean app is so unintuitive, and it's also censoring me. So I tried to reply "fuck off." It just replied "off." It like wouldn't let me do it, and I was like, "All right, fine, I'll put F off." And then, but then I accidentally deleted his comment because the app is so bad. So I never got to tell this guy where to go. But Paul, this is England. If it's like, I like the American podcast because they don't swear. This is fucking England, mate. Who do you think we are? I'm from a
Who
little
the fuck
village.
do you think
Yeah,
you
who the
are?
fuck do you are? I'm from a village. My dad had no toilet in the house. Do you understand?
I
They
mean,
wanted him to work in a factory. I came from a little village. You used to you'd go out on a night and they'd spike your drink and then you'd have a fight. This is where Paul's from a council estate. This is
yeah, it's
England.
true. I
Fuck
mean,
you, America. Go and listen to your shit
so,
American podcast. Go on.
and just for the record, I'd imagine he'd have to point the episode out. But I bet there wasn't much swearing. It's not
There will be now.
ubiquitous in our podcast at all.
No.
Maybe the F word creeps in as a bit of emphasis, but it's not. It's not just liberally spread around like jam on toast.
No,
Something
exactly.
delicious like that.
Very English. Yeah, exactly. This is England. It's not America. Go and listen to Ben Shapiro if that's the kind of thing you want. We will tell it like it is. We'll tell it like it is, but I sound like on these talk rate. Tell you what, here we tell it like it is. 5 to
Yes,
7
us.
weekdays.
Two geezers telling it
Tell
like
it like call in, but I will tell you to fuck off. It's one of those, isn't it? Reminds me of Mike Graham having a go at the Lotus Eaters, and he said, "I am a big shot. I am a big shot." Actually, did you see that? It was so
Yeah, I
funny.
did. Yeah,
He was beefing with the Lotus Eaters. So funny.
brilliant.
It just reminded
I'd
me
love
of
to
that
see
Alan
stuff like
Partridge.
that.
You are nothing, and I am Alan Partridge. You're listening to Mid Morning Matters. It's just so funny.
Absolutely superb.
I don't know why people have a go at Lotus. It's all kicking off. Speaking of which, let's get into our first topic: Reform UK. It's all kicking off with Reform UK. Paul Ben Habib has left, former guest on my podcast, top guy. I should probably try and get him on again, actually. He's left citing things like the failure to democratise the party, Richard Tice throwing the sort of Patriot March people under the bus, calling them that lot, the general direction of travel, certain things, promises, assurances he had that weren't followed through on, and he decided to quit. There's been some issues for a long time with Ben. You could see that he wasn't quite fitting into the party. I like Ben. Did a video about this, put it on YouTube. There's a sort of divide between Team Ben and Team Nigel at this point. Basically, the Team Ben people say, yeah, he's very talented, integrity, intelligence. Why get rid of someone like that? And they say that it's just always going to be the Nigel show, and you just got to go along with Farage at all costs. And the other side will say, well, no, Ben was being too purist. He's being difficult, and you've just got to accept that this, you can't have it all your own way, and it's all about breaking into the mainstream. I felt that Reform were getting too Tory, too mainstream to the point where what's the point if they're going to be really soft on mass deportations, if they're going to have this weird take on Islam that Farage expressed in the Winston Marshall interview, if they're going to vote 60% in favour of assisted dying, which they did because Rupert Lowe, who seems great, but he did vote for that, and as did Tice and Lee Anderson. And that's a fundamental thing, assisted dying. We'll maybe talk about it later, but that's such a big change. And then I think I was maybe right because the day after I put up my video, or the same day as I put up my video, Tim Montgomery joined. And he's a guy who was a Tory advisor for 33 years,
Yeah.
a Boris advisor. And you could say, yeah, they're getting Tories. And 2 Tory councillors went across. So one argument is, yeah, they're destroying the Tories. It's good. The other argument is, are they just becoming the Tories? Discuss.
So Ben Habib, well, one thing's for certain, he's a great commentator. I really admire his work on GB News. Whenever I've seen him in there or heard him on the radio when I'm listening in the car or watching on the telly, I'm always impressed by the way he's over the subject matter and the way he articulates. I can see why he was involved in politics in the first place. I guess on a political level, he lost his weight within the party when he didn't become an MP at the last election. Had he become an MP at the last election, obviously he would have remained within Reform, had a senior position within Reform, and this discussion wouldn't be happening. So I think after that, I think he was made chairman of the party, which was like an honorary position really at the time because essentially Nigel was president of Reform. He certainly was CEO and owner at that point. And I think it's a bit of a moot point now that he didn't democratise on the
He was
basis.
deputy leader. He was joint deputy leader at one point.
Right. Okay. My apologies. So, still sort of a ceremonial position. It felt like at that point because obviously Farage was major shareholder, owner, CEO, and Nigel Farage, which essentially Reform is the Nigel Farage party. It's changing slightly now. It's democratized. It's become a political party. It's not a
Well, it hasn't.
business.
Is Ben's point because he says Nigel's still got all the shares, and they haven't actually made any of these changes that he was
Oh,
promised.
okay. So, but okay. So Ben, so and that's interesting because he has every right to question that, as any voter would do as well. By the way, so if the trajectory continues as we imagine at the moment, and I think what we look at is we look at what's happening in the states and Biden going, Kamala Harris getting an absolute trouncing, and not and Donald Trump, winning everything, absolutely everything, and what's going on in the UK alongside that with Keir Starmer and his attack on everything and anything, and their inability um, to accept that anything they might be doing could be brought into question. I think what we're going to see is the rise of right wing populism. Many of us would see that as a good thing. So, what that really means is probably by 2028, 2029, reform, if they carry on the current trajectory, are going to be in a good shout, or in a good position, should I say, to become, as a minimum, the official opposition. Some would say very likely to become the leading party. Which there'll be people listening to that and think, so that's not possible because the Conservative Party are always going to have a certain amount of voters. But if you smell blood in 2028, if you can see the end of Starmer and his cronies, you can see the end of that sort of socialist uh, financial politics, the bureaucracy, and all the other stuff that they love. Um, and you can see that it's reform that can defeat them and not the Tories. I don't think it splits the vote at all, would be my personal position. And you could see the end of the Tory party completely. My point
Hmm.
is, if that's the case, then Nigel Farage and the Reform Party have to become as legitimate as possible. Now, that will be great in terms of politics, but I think what's going to happen there is people like yourself and Ben Habib would probably have to compromise on the sense
Hmm.
that Farage isn't going to be able to deliver the type of manifesto that people who really bought into reform right from the very beginning. This is not the people that are starting to look towards reform now because they see them as a valid replacement for the Tories. These are the people that were there right from the very beginning because they were patriotic. They believed in Brexit, truly believed in Brexit. They believed in the UK, and they believed in Nigel Farage. Those people are going to be compromised. It's inevitable, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, but there's a line there, isn't there? So I mean, and some people have said, "Oh, you just like attacking reform," and I've had the opposite thing. You just promote reform, which is really weird. I mean, I just give my opinion at a time. One person said, "Oh, you just like attacking reform." It's like, well, I voted for reform, so what's that about? I obviously want them to be good. I don't like attacking them. Someone else said, "I just push reform." When you get to like 40,000 followers, well, it's not a lot. But it's at the point where people say weird stuff like you've been pushing reform and studiously avoiding talking about other parties. I was like, what the hell are you on about? Like, I've just been giving my opinion at the time. I liked reform and I thought they could be like our MAGA movement. Now I'm not so sure and don't really think they can. Thus, I give my opinion. And yet they said I was avoiding the Heritage Party. I actually voted for David Curtin as mayor a while ago. So it's like, I don't know, people come up with these bizarre narratives and it's so
So
annoying. You
what's
just,
I mean? So the supposition there is that you are expected in some way to discuss. We're not the BBC. You're expected in some way to discuss each political party equally.
I
The
know.
point is, we don't care.
No, I'm just a bloke tweeting. I mean, Heritage Party aren't really, they're not a big party, so I wasn't thinking about them. If they came in the news, I'd say something. It's pretty
Yeah, we're
simple.
looking at what we. I think we're all coalescing around the fact that we don't like what Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are doing. We knew that was going to be the case. And I think a lot of people are coalescing around that, irrespective of whether they consider themselves on the right of politics or not. They just don't like what's going on. And we're recording today. We're recording on Wednesday, so it's in the middle of the afternoon. I watched Prime Minister's Question Time earlier, and He is having a field day, Starmer. He doesn't answer anything. Doesn't answer a single question. It's all, but what about? But what
Mm,
about the Tories? Or but what
yeah,
about the black hole? Or but what what about what's her name? It was Prime Minister for 3 minutes.
Liz Truss.
Liz Truss. What about Liz Truss? Sorry, how did I forget Liz Truss? See,
It was quite
that's how
quick.
it works. Certainly, Starmer hasn't forgotten Liz Truss. So what? He doesn't answer a single thing, and he is totally emboldened just by these rabid Labour uh, MPs behind him who are just cheering on anything he says. They would lick his bumhole clean if just to stay in power, and that's not ideal. And
We can get
I
onto
don't
that.
support. Yeah,
Go on. Not
but
the bum hole
so
bit.
yeah, let's call this section the bumhole licking
We could
section.
definitely get onto Starmer and what he's up to, but I just want to finish on this reform thing because um, I don't know where you stand, Paul. Connor Tomlinson wrote a piece saying, "Is this what winning looks like?" And he was critiquing reform really for sort of getting too soft. And then Constantine immediately leapt to, and Richard Tice immediately attacked Connor. He does this strange thing. Tice has been on our show, but he does this strange thing where he attacks people, and he called it. I can't remember what he said now. He said garbage, I think, and he just attacks people in this sort of strange dismissive way, as indeed Farage did. He said that he was glad it was a champagne moment that Ben Habib had left, and good riddance. It's like that's not really great. Whereas Ben has never stooped to that, so that's not great. But then Constantine defended Tice. Now, to me, that just shows where things are. So I just said, I know that Tice has attacked Connor for this article, while E.g. Constantine backs Tice, which isn't surprising because Reform are a liberal party. If you don't believe me, ask Peter Hitchens. They constantly attack the right. Their approach to Islam seems to come from Michel Welbeck's submission, and 60% of their MPs back assisted dying. Then I say I voted for them, so this isn't some hit job. It just seems clear they're economically and socially liberal. There remains no mainstream party on the right because such things aren't permitted by our system. Will be interesting to see how well they do in the election. We could end up with a three-way split between Labour, Tories, and Reform. Then things will get really weird, and that's what Dominic Cummings has predicted, which we could get into. But my point is just quite dispassionately, yeah, I think they're a liberal party. I'm not mad. I'm just like, okay, yeah, this is the way they're going. And now they've got Tim Montgomery, who was on the One Nation side of the Tories, as I understand it. So it's like, okay, basically what it is, Farage can't get in the Tories, so they're going to just pull all the Tories out like a magnet. He's just going to suction all the Tories over to Farage, right? Because Tories were stupid enough to let Farage in. So he goes, okay, I'll just take all the Tories, and then he'll just end up de facto leader of the Tories, but it will be called Reform. But the question is, if you lose anything that makes you different from them, then what's the point? And that's my concern.
Yeah. So what we're finding with reform is it's filling a huge political void. So the Uni Party, which is essentially Labour and the Tories, have been around for eons. Okay, and there was a huge, huge void that's being filled potentially by reform if they get it right. But because that void is so large, it's got lots of potential supporters. So you're talking about Constantine there, Richard Tice, Michel Welbeck, all this, yourself, me. We're all coming at this from a slightly different political angle, and we're probably all hoping that they fulfil some of our political wants and needs. So, because it's so wide reaching, because that void's so big, at the moment, there is no real coalition around what reform means. Reform just means, at the moment, anti immigration, pro UK, and anti uni party, which are all good things. But it does leave a lot to be desired. And at the moment, there's a bit of a vacuum because there is no real manifesto. So there's no real manifesto from reform. We don't know what they would do if there was a general election tomorrow and they had stood a chance of winning. So that's why you've got this void, and there's a vacuum that's being filled by all sorts of political commentators who are chucking in their two penneth. It is disappointing to hear that perhaps there's some glee about Ben Habib going, even if he was problematic in the background. I think that you just, particularly if you remain within reform, and especially if you're Nigel Farage, you just be stoic about it. You just say, Ben did a great job for us. Thanks for your support during the time. Wish you well. That's all you got to do. That's it. It's done because you're already in a position that requires you not to do that.
Yeah,
So, with regards to Ben Habib, I'm sure whatever he goes on to do will be pretty good. I think he'll find himself in the media more and more. But with regards to what reform should do and the people that are commentating on it, it's this huge void that's trying to be filled with all sorts of ideas. And that'll be the tricky thing for reform to achieve over the next 4 to 5 years, because they could take a lot of people with them, but it'll take quite a bit of compromise, I think.
Yeah, okay. And my thing is just if they want to be a liberal party, I mean, they're obviously a Thatcherite economics party, fine, but they just seem to be a totally socially liberal party. I mean, assisted dying, that's a big one. They seem to be getting soft on a lot of issues. A lot of people are not happy with Zia, whatever, what's he called, Zia thingy, the new chairman, Yusuf, is it? So people don't seem to be too happy with him as well because they're a
Is
bit
he the
worried.
financial? Is he the big financial backer guy?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I knew it was called Zia Yusuf. You know, in your mind's like, but what if he's not,
yeah, I
Nick?
know
And
the
then you
guy you
just,
mean.
huh? Used to be called
Sorry, I know the guy
Cat
you mean.
Stevens.
Just
Now
want to
it's
make sure that I've got the right guy.
yeah, was Cat Stevens. Now it's Zia Yusuf.
Yeah,
That's a stupid joke. Well, I mean, you talk about uni party. Dominic Cummings did a really interesting interview where he thinks they could end up with a three-way split. He just says it depends how serious Farage gets, but if he really gets serious, he can take out the Tories. But he talks about the possibility of a three-way split with them all on 20-something%, Tories, Labour reform all on about 20-something%, and then he goes, "Next, what comes next? What comes next? That's really interesting." And you might imagine it's probably a Dominic Cummings party, but
yeah,
it does have a point though. They can just cancel each other out in this attempt to remove the Tories, and they maybe not. It feels to me they're not quite the answer. I mean, they're just not quite. My thing is, maybe they just. I think I said in the video, it's as if they battered down the walls of the castle, battered down the door, but then they're spent. They got in the House of Commons, and that was an achievement. They changed mainstream politics. They've seriously dented the Tories, maybe destroyed them. But what are they actually then going to do? I really
yeah.
like
They
Rupert
haven't.
Lowe, so maybe they will do stuff. But it's like, what are they actually going to do? Sorry.
Yeah. So the point about that is you can look at the percentage of the vote, the amount of votes they got, etc., etc., etc. Reform did well on that basis, and they got 5 seats, which was no mean feat. Absolutely fantastic. But by no means have they won the game. The the game isn't proportional representation. The game is what it is, first past the post. And at the moment, that is really falling in favour of Labour or the Tories. So, in order to win the game, they're going to have to change the way they play the game, reform. And, I'm not saying anything Nigel Farage, for instance, won't understand. What will be interesting is if they do get big financial backing. So, Elon Musk comes in
Right.
and donates £100 million. Okay.
Yeah,
Now I know
there
that's
was
rumored
talk of
this
that, wasn't
weekend.
there? Yeah.
Yeah, so that was rumored this weekend. I think it was the Telegraph that wrote the story for the Sunday Telegraph, and they spoke to Nigel Farage asking for details on the Saturday afternoon. I think Nigel said on GB News recently, and he said it was the first he'd heard of it. He looked very gleeful about it, as might he should. But if that was to actually happen, and it's not impossible, £100 million to Elon Musk,
$100 million. I'm just looking at it now. So about
about
78 million quid.
78 million pounds. So let's say it was that could change the game. Because it means you could start to reach people you didn't reach before, and also it will attract. You will see some of the Donald Trump effect happening in the UK. You don't need to have them, as Donald Trump proved, by the way. I mean, apparently, the latest estimates is that Kamala Harris had the best part of £2 billion spent on her campaign. I mean, arguably one of the worst campaigns anyone's ever seen. So it's not about how
It was
much money
flawless,
you've got.
Paul. It's a flawless campaign. They
Yeah, but
call it
that was
in
by
Democrats.
the people who believed in the nonsense that she was spouting. So she thought she was talking to everyone. Turns out she wasn't. She wasn't at all. She was preaching to the choir, whereas Donald Trump was actually changing hearts and minds. And what they chose to do when they learned that was say, well, those people are stupid or ignorant or racist or bigoted or whatever word they wanted to chuck out on that any given time. They were questioned about it. But of course, they weren't. They were people that were looking for different politics, and what they cared about was the economy and how day to day things were working for them.
Yeah.
Nigel Farage can tune in on that, and he has done already. He's been very astute when it comes to immigration. He's treading a very fine line. I know we've had this discussion before, and perhaps you think he's erring too liberally on that at times. And we'll get onto that with Starmer shortly, because it feels like Starmer at the moment is perhaps slightly to the right of Nigel Farage when it comes to immigration, which is ridiculous. But we'll get onto that. So that could change the landscape of British politics, and that could really make reform a tour de force. But they only replace the Tories they could steal from the Liberals and they could from Liberal Democrats and they could steal from Labour. A lot of people think that's nonsense, but there's a huge swathe of Labour voters that are there to be won for
Oh yeah.
sure. And Liberal Democrats, lots of people vote for Liberal Democrats. They're like, just, I don't know what to do. I'm going to vote for Liberal Democrats. Quite a safe bet, never really going anywhere. Of course, in 2010, 2011, that became a huge problem and that set them back quite a long way. Now, obviously, Ed Davey's come along now and he's taken the old well, I don't know what approach it is, a fairly unique approach about being just this, trying to be this very likable guy in tune with social justice, but also just likes jumping in waters and canoeing and riding the
And
rod flume.
challenging Keir Starmer to a FIFA charity match
Yeah,
repeatedly.
absolutely. I mean, sorry, America, what a load of bollocks. I mean,
Total clown.
the trouble with that is, let's say there is this huge kerfuffle and lots more seats are up for grabs. Really and truly, do you want that man to be your leader? Because when we look back at that, no one's going to take that seriously. Lovely guy. We all know lovely guys. Ed Davey seems a lovely guy. But particularly in this current political climate, geopolitical climate, what's Ed Davey going to do? Who's he going to stand up to? Imagine Putin trying to negotiate with
Yeah.
Ed Davey. Like,
What
come
is
on, let's go to
FIFA?
Chessington World of Adventures.
We play FIFA. Yeah, he challenges Putin to a FIFA. Turns out Ed Davies like the best FIFA player. Beats Putin at FIFA. I bet his bet. You take Russia. Loses Russia in a bet. Has to pull out of the war in Ukraine because he lost it. He lost 3-2 at FIFA to Ed Davey.
Yeah.
And then he tries to do best of three. We go on water slide. And then again, it's what Ed Davey's best at. Damn it! I
Yeah.
can't beat this guy.
Just
Okay, can you imagine Putin? That's the real quiz. He loses like a series of challenges to Ed Davey. if I
David
be,
Brent
that was real quiz. No, Putin, you lost. I'm sorry.
just chucking Ed Davies' shoes over the building outside.
That was like an obscure mixture of references that like hardly anyone's going to get that. You have to
Yeah,
like The
sorry,
Office,
guys.
know who Ed Davey is, and know who Putin is. I think most people know probably one to two of those.
You need to know the UK office as well, not the American office.
Oh, not the American trash, yeah. So just quickly on that team, yeah, the team aspect is so important. I'm glad you brought up Musk because I've been thinking that the team aspect is so important because Trump assembled this extraordinary team with Musk and Vivek and JD Vance and Tulsi and RFK Jr. And it was like, wow. But does Farage have that? He's got Rupert Lowe, who seems very strong, but he's booting out people like Ben or alienating them to the point where they leave. I just wonder, and I wonder if they deserve that 100 million from Musk. I mean, maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe Farage will also change his rhetoric. It's definitely possible. But I sort of believe where I believed in total pragmatism about MAGA and basically a cult-like devotion to Trump. I just don't quite believe the same with Farage, even though he is my esteemed GB News colleague and he's got a great show on GB News. As a political figure, he's obviously incredibly impressive, individual, extraordinary campaigner, extraordinary once in a generation figure. Not dissing him by any means, but I just don't know if it's quite. I can't quite. Not that it matters what I do. I can't even vote in America, and my vote here doesn't mean anything because Labour always win in my area. But I just can't quite back him in the same way that I can back Trump because I just don't quite believe in the project in the same way. Whereas Trump showed that he's like, right, mass deportations is in my campaign, and like we're cutting the government with Musk and with the Doge thing, and I just don't quite see the same. I see stuff from Rupert Lowe that's really good. I don't quite see the same from Farage. He's just so careful. Our system is different, of course.
He's going to have to get. He's going to have to become very inventive with immigration because he feels like he's protecting. He's trying to protect his reputation when it comes to immigration, and that's two fronts. That's proving he's still very much anti-immigration, which of course he is. No one's bringing that into question. Okay, he's anti-illegal immigration, and he's all about protecting borders and keeping legal immigration down. And a lot of people will support that because they're seeing what's happening to them specifically in their area. But also, he needs to protect himself from in this particular landscape against those accusations of racism, etc., because that still carries some weight. Now, he needs to build this force field around him like Donald Trump does. So Donald Trump just very much says what he's thinking and goes with it, and because of the way he is and the way people go with him, people it seems to be it's like bullets off of him, and I want to use a different analogy, but because fight, 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 but he people not just did not buy the narrative anymore that he was a fascist, Nazi, racist. It just got thrown at him so often that it just didn't stick anymore. And the people that believed it have proven themselves to be a little bit silly, really. And I should use stronger language, but people. I understand people vote for a whole raft of reasons, and all power to them. I'm glad we live in a democracy, but they got it wrong. They truly got it wrong. He's not a fascist. He's not a Nazi. He's not racist, but he is patriotic, and patriotic is a dirty word in some parts of the West.
Yeah, and crucially, as you say, no one bought it, and that's partly because they saw him in the first term not be a fascist. And the other thing is, the reason I back Trump so much is that first term, he was bamboozled by the deep state somewhat. John Bolton, all the neocons, many others. This time, one assumes he's going a lot more eyes open. These people are scum. These people are snakes. Let's get my people in. Let's gut the
Oh
deep
man,
state. And that's another difference with Farage. Whereas I think Farage just, you saw Starmer cross the commons and have his nice chat with Farage. Internet's reading too much into it, but I just think Farage is always desperate to get in to the establishment ultimately, whereas Trump's looking at it this time. I think Trump's been the same. He wants to be liked by the establishment, but this time, surely he'll go in and be a lot more right. These people, we've got to get rid of these people. Whereas Farage isn't in that position. It's going to be a Herculean effort just for him to get in there. For him to even get 5 MPs was, as you say, a huge
yeah,
achievement in our system.
yeah,
So I just don't think it's quite the same.
yeah, absolutely. It'd be very difficult to replicate what Trump's done in the States in the UK under Nigel Farage, but the way he built his base, Trump, definitely somebody can build a base like that in this country. Absolutely, they can. And it being a new party does make that easier in many ways. You think that actually, because our democracy is so well established, a millennia old, that you'd need to be part of the Tories or Labour. Unlike in the States, where you've got essentially a two-party, well, not essentially, totally a two-party system with just the Democrats and the Republicans. Over here, we talk about the uniparty being Labour or Conservative or the Lib Dems or whatever. You've only got to go back 100 years, and some of those parties weren't even there. Labour
Mm-hmm.
wasn't there. Liberal Democrats wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
The Conservative Party were, and there was a Liberal. I forget what the Liberal Party was called now, but it's very possible within our political landscape to come from nothing and become something.
Yeah, you had
Labour
the
did it.
Whigs and the Tories divide, didn't you?
That's right. That's right. That's what I was trying to think of. Thanks, Nick.
No
So
worries.
it is.
That's what I'm here for, isn't it? As Lewis says, Nick knows everything. This is
I'm
a decent
laughing
rule of
because I know
thumb.
you so well. So your no worries was like a full, just accept. Yes, yes, I did save that because otherwise it would have been useless without it. And you're right. The Whigs and the Tories. I love it.
Wasn't that sinister?
But
I was just laughing at the way
no, I know it wasn't.
my
I know
sort
it
of
just, but
know-it-all persona.
which I admire greatly, as you know, Nick. But we do. But sorry, it is possible. So actually, Nigel Farage stands on the precipice of something potentially gigantic in British politics. And it could happen as quickly as 4 to 5 years' time.
Yeah, it is interesting. I just wonder. If it's Farage is desperate to say we don't want anything to do with that lot. Anyone on the right, to me, they're just desperate to not be a party that cares about the right, and they only care about being liberal and getting Labour votes. So to me, I don't. You don't have to get mad about it. You just go, okay, maybe it's not party for me, but it's maybe the party for lots of people. The other thing is they become sort of accepted. There might be this thing where they're becoming accepted by the mainstream. It's a bit conspiratorial, but there's suddenly this guy Nicholas Lissack, some kid who just suddenly got 40,000 Twitter followers. And it later came out, it seemed that he was working as a researcher for Isabel Oakeshott. And he gets this long
Right.
thread from Sky News. And it's like, he kind of looks the part. It's kind of like, oh yeah, and I just think young men, there's no, they've not, no one's speaking to young men. It's like, it's a kind of astroturfed resistance. My take on it is like, is the regime sort of accepting, okay, we're going to let Farage in. We've got to do something about young men. This reform thing is real. We can't get rid of it. So we have to absorb it. And in a way, Starmer crossing the Commons to shake his hand and Sky News do a sort of puff piece. You've got this astroturfed influencer guy who's just popped out of nowhere, works for Isabel Oakeshott, who goes out with Richard Tice, who's in before. I don't know. It's just all a little bit other media sort of. Since when does Sky News do long, sort of splashy pieces on reform that are kind of pro. I don't know. I'm wondering if something's going on.
You had a guest on just after me your first guest after Donald Trump that wasn't me.
Yeah,
What was the name of the
academic
guy?
agent, Dr.
Yeah,
Nima Parvini.
that's right. Yeah. Now he has a complete theory on this, and the way the media will try and make sure certain things they're telling us what's going to happen. Essentially, it doesn't always come to fruition, but very often it does. The media are telling us what's going to happen,
Yeah.
and you can see that they're placing bets on Nigel Farage, and they're positioning themselves so they don't look entirely foolish if he does start some big political rebellion.
Yeah.
So there is that you can feel the very essence of that, and you will see more favourable mainstream media stuff about him, or people on the right at least.
And is that why
Uh,
he's become more moderate in his rhetoric as well? Is it a two-way thing?
oh, it's really interesting. Um, he's mainstream now, Nigel Farage. He spent his whole career, political career, as an outsider until July the 4th, 2024, when he became an MP. And now he is in the system and he's part of the mainstream. So it'd be very interesting to see how that pans out. And that just feeds into nearly every conversation we've already had
Hmm.
today. But it could be very interesting to see does he have to be successful, or does it go to your head and force you that way because it's a very comfortable pair of slippers, isn't it? The mainstream.
Yeah, exactly. And remains to be seen. I think we've laid out the arguments. I can sense that you're a little bit more sympathetic
So
than me, and
I but I'm coming at so the reason I am, and I agree with that. The reason I am is I'm coming at reform relatively fresh. So I wasn't. I've never been a part of. I've never joined any political party. I still have not got the membership of any political party. Um, I voted. I voted Labour until Corbyn, as to much to the disgust of our listeners last time. Got a bit of feedback about that. It was almost like they were like, "Oh, we thought we liked you." Okay,
right.
okay, okay. That's fair enough, because maybe you look at me differently as someone. But like I said, then I'm from a working class background. Labour used to represent people like me and my family and my friends at that time. They don't any longer, and it felt like the Tories were toffs, and they didn't. Whereas now that's changed slightly. So I voted Tories because I didn't want. No, did I ever vote Tory? I think I did. Do you know what? I voted them all. I have voted red, yellow, and blue at some point, and I voted Reform at the last election. But it's part of that void. So I'm part of that void, and I am attracted to that vacuum. But I'm coming at it from a slightly less principled direction than you and many others are, because I wasn't part of Reform when it started. It just seemed like an upstart. How could this possibly help in any way? And at the moment, it's not made much difference, but it will do. Almost certainly, it will do. So I'm not as dyed in the wool as you are, Nick. So I don't want. It's not my opinion versus yours on this. It's you have the legitimate Reform. I've been there. I've known the band since the beginning. They've had a number one album, and I'm like, yeah, I'm well into Reform. I might even get one of their tickets for Wembley.
Yeah, well, Constantine compared it to that. He said it's like people said the same to him, or we preferred the early stuff. Obviously, not the really early stuff when it was me and Francis before he nicked my co-host and producer, but the somewhat early stuff. And
Unbelievable, Nick.
I don't
How
think
did you get
it's
that in?
it's all right. We're doing a podcast now with you. A mere 8 years later. I don't even I don't know if it's that. I just think it's not. I don't think it's that. But if Constantine's backing him and Connor's not, yeah, fine. They're a liberal party. Constantine's like a centre left liberal. I don't say this to get mad. I just say like that's where they're positioned. Fine, that's okay. It's just that they can't really be a party on the right in the UK. As I've said, it's just not allowed by the system. This is a perennial problem. But anyway, there we are. I love when you said it. You're attracted to the vacuum. Paul Cox attracted to the vacuum. Um, you're like a dog. You get the Hoover out and you've got a puppy, and he's attracted to the vacuum. Do you ever have that? Your dog just like leaps at the Hoover and you
Yeah,
can't Hoover because he starts barking at it.
that is exactly
It just
me.
popped into my head. Sorry, I love a pun. I'm just trying to like. It's meant to be a comedic podcast. One other thing. Lastly, on this, I keep saying lastly, but if my tune would have been changed, but if Reform had just picked me, if they picked me from the start, said, "Right, Nick, you can lead this for it." I think you apply yourself, don't you? But they should have just got in touch with me because I would be one of the best political candidates out there. Now, obviously, there'd be a lot of explaining of tweets. That would be about 80%
Oh,
of
they
what
do.
Tice would go
They
about.
really
Look,
go
I mean,
back.
I've read that tweet. It's not great. It's not great. We all post things that aren't great. Look, we all post things. We've all done it. That we post things that aren't great. You've had a few. You're out with the lads, and you tweeted something. And look, he regrets it now, and he doesn't feel that way about those people. He was a comedian at the time. He's done a lot of good work. I just imagine Tice on the apology tour because he's had to go out because of James McMurdoch, of course, who has had this trouble in his background, and he had a thing on Sky. It's like, well, no, he served his time. That is a thing in our society. Like, we don't recognize anymore. You've served your time. We have to forgive you. We don't really have that anymore. We have like, no, you're cancelled forever because of one indiscretion. So, or in that case, quite bad incident. But anyway, that's a digression. Maybe we should get on to old Starmer because you've teased it, Paul. And we just wanted to compare and contrast with Starmer. We're a little bit late to it in a way when we're recording, but he came out and in reference to the immigration figures being revised upwards of already completely mental and insane to completely bonkers, insane, mental. Basically, they were already incredibly high. Then they're like, do you know what? They were even higher, guys. So that was the ONS revising it up. We're talking about 8 billion a year. So it was 725,000. It was something insane. It went up to like it went up by
904.
it went up
Went up to
by
it,
100 and something thousand. So to like it's basically a million a year. So anyway, Starmer came out and even did a special press conference, as I'm sure you know, and he said a failure on this scale isn't just bad luck. Isn't a global trend or taking your eye off the ball. This is a different order of failure. He said this happened by design, not accident, and that's what everyone's like. Sorry, kid. Did you say? Did you
Yeah.
say we were deliberately flooded with immigrants to replace the existing population? You just went full conspiracy
We got a
theory.
theory for that, haven't we?
Yeah. I think I've seen that on a forum. Didn't know you were in there, Keir. You were like great replacement 107, loads of numbers after your name, and that was Keir Starmer posting all the time in that group you were in. That's just satire. Don't sue me or put me in jail, please, Keir. We're merely pointing out that his rhetoric is similar to sort of what would have been called far-right conspiracy theories. He said it's by design that the Tories have just destroyed the country. And what I found absolutely fascinating, Paul, was what I call temporal gaslighting. I'll coin a term occasionally, come out with a bit of a neologism, and I just got that wrong and sounded like I was saying jizz then. That's the podcast is a mixture of high and low culture. Basically, I coined the term temporal gaslighting, and what I mean is it's time and it's gaslighting. So you say, oh no, it wasn't the Wuhan lab. The Wuhan virus didn't come from the Wuhan virus lab, Paul. Are you insane? It came from a wet bat that someone bit the head off in a market, which isn't racist. That's the non-racist version, by the way. The racist one is the Wuhan lab version. We've come up with this non-racist narrative that basically Chinese people eat bats in markets. Anyway, that was the narrative.
Wet ones.
Yeah, wet bats. And then one day it was like, I know the bat's not actually wet. Don't write in. Then one day it was a wet market. I'm more of a dry market guy, man. So I've got to say, fully dry market. Anything wet, I'm out. Do you know what I mean? I'm just a total dry man. It doesn't apply to all situations. Anyway, we're not that kind of podcast. But when it comes to markets, I like them dry. Get back on topic, Nick. The point is, they said wet market bat. And then one day, John Stewart came out and said it was obviously the virus. And then suddenly you're allowed to say it's the virus lab. Okay, and it wasn't a conspiracy, and you weren't cancelled anymore. So the same with immigration. No, you're a racist. You're a far right conspiracy theorist. Oh no, it's definitely happening. It was deliberate, and Boris did it, and we can score some political points. Then immediately, all the journalists who formerly would have denied it, presumably, or at least wouldn't have talked about it, they suddenly go, yes, sir, and why are we addicted to immigration? Why is this replacement happening? Why have the Tories deliberately done this? Why are there migrant hotels? And it's just like, oh, so you've all, it is real, and you've just admitted it. But it's so interesting. Now, why did this happen now, in your opinion?
There's two. He's a flip-flopper for a start. So you never really know what Keir Starmer is trying to do. You can't nail him down and say, you understand
like any
what
great
Farage
politician.
is trying to do.
You never know what he's going to do.
the same applied to Boris Johnson, for instance. You really didn't understand what his politics were, um, and the same can be said of Keir Starmer in many ways. You know what Trump wants to achieve, you know what Farage wants to achieve, and the mainstream media really do hate somebody who understands what they want to deliver, because they're not as malleable, they're not as flexible. They want to achieve. This is what they set out a manifesto and they want to deliver it. God forbid. So there's that theory, but also you've only got to go back 6 years, and people like Hillary Clinton were saying exactly the same thing in the States, and then bosh, Donald Trump comes in and they're saying completely the opposite. It feels to me like there's a connection between the left in the States and the left in the UK, and there is a conspiracy theory there that I'm very happy to indulge in, that there is some one world WEF, a dastardly thing going on, and they're just playing a game. And the game is, we're gonna pretend that nothing happened before now. So we're going to say something now, and if anyone says, but just the other year you said this, we'll just deny it all, and you end up with this absolute crazy, crazy situation like COVID, where you and I are having a discussion about what's most racist. Is it the wet bat? I mean, how the idea that it absolutely could not have come from the Wuhan lab is ridiculous. But if you just keep saying it couldn't be, or if you think so, it's racist, people will soon forget it. People are easily programmed. So that's what's going on the left of politics. They're just reprogramming people so that we, or the people they want to believe them, buy into what they're saying. I mean, the worrying thing is, where's his integrity? So, at what point does he have to admit to himself that this is completely the opposite to what he said, or what his party was saying, or politicians on his side of the Commons were saying just weeks ago? Weeks, at most months ago, and to say this now, and use the language of replacement theory as well, which, by the way, I know we've all said it. This is not new. Is exactly the sort of thing that would have got you a prison sentence in the summer of 2024. Undoubtedly. A tweet of that nature, coupled with what went on in Southport, would have very possibly got you a court date. And a court date in the summer of 2024 meant court in the morning, jail in the afternoon. So make no bones about it. It's incredibly serious that they're able just to change the narrative just like that. And nobody believes it. Of course they don't believe it.
And the question is why. And some people have speculated that it's to do with the threat of the Southport thing, complications around that, trying to get ahead of that narrative. Some people have said it's the threat of Reform UK and everything Farage is doing. Some people say it's the petition, getting all those signatures, the petition to have a general election, how low Starmer's approval rating is in general. There's also an obvious one that it takes out Kemi. I mean, Kemi just the day before put out a thing about immigration, what she was going to do about it, and then Starmer can just go, well, actually, you presided over this catastrophic, deliberate destruction of the country, and that basically buries the Tories. I mean, I'm surprised he hasn't used it sooner, but he wasn't prepared to go there for whatever reason. Now he's just gone, right, I'm burying you on this, and it absolutely destroys the Tories, that, to me, especially because they didn't pick Jenrick. If they'd picked Jenrick, he could have gone, well, no, I resigned over that, and I am very tough on it now. Whereas Kemi, she did sort of, there's those clips where she's kind of like going along with it. Is she even saying it's good to have more immigration? People get very angry, but she is essentially an immigrant herself. People get mad about that, but she touched down in England, then lived the first 16 years of her life in Nigeria. It does make it harder for her, I believe, to be very tough on it in her rhetoric. Personally, I think that you can have your own view, but he just now gets to bury the Tories with that, and it's what can they do? It is what they did was such a betrayal. It is catastrophic. So what it does is it means people choose between reform. If they really care about that issue, they'll choose between reform. But now they have an option to vote Labour to kind of claw back reform votes. Is that what it's about?
Very quickly on the Kemi thing, slightly different view in the sense that I think it gives her a pass to talk about it, and I think that was her strength. So her strength was she was an immigrant and a black woman. All those things together are kryptonite for the Labour Party. So I think it does give her a platform to speak on that's not as easily challenged as if a white, straight, guy born in the UK does. However, with regards to immigrant, sorry, what was the main bulk of that question,
Well,
Nick? I lost my.
I'm just wondering what it does. Well, one, does he actually? I'll change the question.
Right.
Does he actually do
No, I
anything
get it
about
now.
it?
Sorry, mate.
And two, what is the actual tactic behind it?
So, okay, irrespective of the tactic or the strategy on either side, none of their arguments stand up to scrutiny. So both the Tories and the Labour Party are 100% responsible for the immigration crisis we got now. It started with Tory. It started with Tory Blair,
Tory
but
Blair.
Tony Blair in 1998 when we two things happened. We flooded the UK with cheap immigration to build the economy, and he introduced student fees. So we flooded the market with foreign students with lots of money. So every student became a customer. That generated lots of new universities, and now they're really struggling. They're really struggling, and they're at the behest of these wealthy foreign students. Also, well, the whole train started then. Of course, the Tories came in. They were back in power by 2010 in the coalition, and they did absolutely nothing about it because the Tory government was Cameron Clegg, and arguably that was more liberal than Brown. He was a shrewd economist, Brown, but I think that's probably undeniable. However, he didn't. I don't think he presided over. I think he made some serious mistakes, and we're paying for them now. Perhaps for another time. But the point is, it started with Labour, and it was continued with the Tories. So none of them, none of them can come up with a policy now that stands up to too much scrutiny because you can look back and go, "What about?" So this is where it makes it easy for Farage, Tyson chums in the Reform Party. The reason they're doing it now is because they have to, because it's their way of admitting there is a problem. It's their way. It's what was unable to be politically articulated very well during this summer. I mean, no one, you and I have never said the way that the rioters went about their business was the ideal way to achieve their point. Not at all. It has to be, whether we like it or not, that's not the way to achieve political gains. However, they all, the majority of it, there were some absolute fucking idiots there, sorry, America, who probably deserved to get themselves into a lot of trouble. But the vast bulk of them were people who were very, very, very concerned about what they were seeing. And what essentially Starmer is doing now, after putting some of those people away for tweets who are saying exactly the same thing, is he is echoing their sentiment. He is echoing their sentiment. It's I don't know quite how to compare it. If you were at school and you make a complaint about something, the headmaster gives you a detention and then stands up in assembly and agrees with you, but just says, "Yeah, when I say it, it's different."
How long is it before we see Starmer out on a protest with his England face paint? Like, look, it's gone too far. I was just this country has been flooded under this. Is that you, Keir? Oh, and then he has to pretend he's just at the England football game or something. And
No, it's me,
passes it off.
Trev.
That'd be
Couldn't. No, but he
Keir
couldn't.
Starmer
Could he?
throwing a brick at, at police and like screaming about Starmer, two-tier Keir. His personality just splits in two. He has a sort of total psychogenic fugue, whatever it's called. He just breaks down. He's screaming about two-tier Keir, but he is himself Keir. Is that possible?
Yeah, exactly. It's
I'd say that's likely.
It's schizophrenia, isn't it? It's like political schizophrenia. And what have we got here? We got somebody who's essentially saying, in order, by the way, to sink. And they still are in opposition mode. This is still 100% opposition mode. This is saying they're to blame, they're to blame, they're to blame. Now, it's not saying it's not wiping the slate clean and going, we need to move forward from this point and this is what we're going to do, which is what actually everybody needs, right? He's throwing them under the political bus, and he's saying the Tories started this and it was deliberate, and they flooded the UK with illegal aliens. Well, do you know what? Yeah, so did Labour. And by the way, this is exactly what everybody is now getting borderline terrified about. This is no longer a concern. This is people are terrified because the optics are you can't go to London without getting stabbed. You can't go to any inner city without being a minority as a British citizen. And whilst some of that is not entirely true, I go to London most weeks, and I'm not going to say it, but it's not happened to me yet. Uh,
You're
the
rarely stabbed.
optics
You're 3 out of
have
5
rarely been
times.
stabbed, and I would say most of the people I've been stabbed by could have gone on to be doctors and engineers. But
It is dangerous, though, isn't it? Even where we work, as in the Marks and Spencer the other day, and it's like migrants fighting the security guards, and
yeah,
they're known for beating people up in that area. They live in the tent. Now, London is mental. London is
we
proper
we
demolition man stuff now.
so what some people won't understand
Although
is
the underground people are the goodies in demolition. That's a bad analogy, but it's proper dystopia. Go
periodically we have had extra security around where we work to protect us.
on.
It only lasts a couple of days. Something will happen, and then
Yeah.
it'll last a couple of days, and it goes away again. Um, and I don't want to put ideas in people's minds, but we are
Yeah.
incredibly vulnerable because we talk the way that we do, and we're not in line, and we're against. And then they go, "There's your fee, which doesn't cover that risk." And by the way, now just walk out into central London. So it's our choice and our risk. But there is an environment in which we're walking into, which has been created by people like Keir Starmer, and he's coming in order to score political points. He's telling us all this is happening. It changes nothing. All it does is it probably makes the families of the people that are rotting in prison this Christmas, and will do for the next 2 or 3 Christmases, um, even angrier than they were. And it makes no difference to the immigration situation, to the crime situation, because none of the woke social justice must be kind to all minorities politics that goes on has gone anywhere. You can stand up in a press conference and say whatever you like. He's not changed anything. So we still got exactly the same environment. He's still on the wrong side of this, and he's not going to change anything.
Yeah, and just on this, sorry, police, on the point you're making, put out this tweet. Whilst you're out and about at events across Surrey in the festive period, you may see some armed police presence. We appreciate this can
Beautiful.
be an alarming sight, which is why we wanted to take time to reassure you these are part of routine foot patrols. Like, are they Surrey police? Because I grew up in a country called England. And I don't recall routine armed police foot patrols. We didn't have any of that crap. We didn't need it because our country hadn't been destroyed by our leaders deliberately, as Starmer now confirms. We didn't have that. That's just unrecognizable to us in England, but that's where we are now. Christmas markets with barriers, and we're all fucking sick of it. I've sworn again. Sorry, America, as you keep saying. It's not even America. It's a guy that said American podcasts don't have it, but your comment makes
Probably
sense.
not in
Sorry,
America.
sorry, America. And just look, yeah, you're right. Starmer's desperate because his approval rating is so low that we did a piece the other day on GB. It's lower than Trump. Trump's is very low in the UK. It's something like -27. From memory, Starmer's was -30. And
32, yeah.
right, whereas Clarkson +15. Clarkson is the man. He's the spiritual leader. He's the populist de facto leader of Britain, even though he says he won't actually lead and he'd be a bad leader. He's who the people are looking to. Our king has +27. He's the only one higher than Clarkson, whereas Starmer, the most hated in the country. Isn't that incredible? It's so low.
It is
So,
incredible.
and that's so quick how he's done that. We've got to go from YouTube. We got 20 something minutes on the extra stuff on nickdixon.net, and then Paul's got to go. We're going to talk about Joe Biden pardoning his son and maybe assisted dying if we get onto it. Maybe Greg Wallace. We don't have time for everything, but we'll do our best. Paul, you're on Paul Cox Comedy, right?
I certainly am. That's correct. At Paul Cox Comedy. Find me
Yes, I
on
could have
Twitter,
just used
Facebook,
my eyes to read.
Instagram.
At Paul Cox Comedy on all platforms. If you want the full version, as ever, go to nickdixon.net. It's very reasonably priced, and you have all my full interviews with all the people I mentioned: Ben Habib, Carl Benjamin, Lord Frost, Nima Parvati, just a few that spring to mind. Stephen Edgerton, that was a great one. And you get all my articles, etc., my private chat group, all on nickdixon.net. So go there now for the full version of this. But goodbye to YouTube, and thank you very much.